But first, it's on to this week's starting five, the five biggest storylines in women's basketball. Mitch, start us off with your trip up to Minneapolis to see the Lynx, the Wings, Paige, and her homecoming to the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, so I got the chance to fly to Minneapolis. Shout out to Sherwin Williams, who brought some media members up there for this trip to cover Paige Bueckers' homecoming game in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. First time she's played in that arena since she lost the 2022 national championship game to South Carolina when she was a sophomore at UConn. That was also the last time I was in Minneapolis. And I just have to say, I want Minneapolis to host more Final Fours and like more big events.
Well, they're doing the Big Ten tournament, and they've done it to some rousing success.
Yeah, I like Minneapolis a lot. Like just as it's a walkable city. I like the cold, so I prefer that as well. I think it's a good arena for those type of big events. That aside, really good crowd there. It was a Wednesday night game, Lynx Wings. Really good crowd there. My kind of takeaways from just like watching, the game and watching these two teams play was, number one, I think Nafisa Collier, and we could get into this more later, with Caitlin going out now with an injury, I think she is your front runner for MVP so far this season. Again,
nice
like small sample size, we're only a week or two into the season. But I think she's even favored now at some sports books. She's just putting up really big numbers. She is definitely the bus driver for that team, and like does it in a lot of different ways. She can score, she can rebound, she can defend. She does all the things. So that's first and foremost for her. The Lynx look great. They're going to figure out like some kinks and stuff along the way, but I expect them to make a deep playoff run again. Paige, I think, is figuring it out and settling into her own, I think, as a pro player. This was her first career double-double, which was cool. She got it with assists. I think 12 points and 10 assists was her final stat line. They kept it close with the Lynx up to the end. And then my last takeaway is like, I don't think the roster that the Wings have as currently constructed is going to win you a lot of basketball games. I think it's kind of weird, just sort of like how they're using some of their players. As we've talked about a lot on this podcast, like I think the Wings don't want the ball in Arike Ogunbowale's hands a lot, but that's what keeps happening in every game. She gets the ball in her hands a lot, and she takes a lot of shots. And Paige has been a type of player throughout her college career that is willing to defer, in terms of an offensive player, and pass the ball off to, her teammates and stuff like that, and set up other players. And it's just not really working, I think, with Arike Ogunbowale. And sort of the conclusion that I came to is like, okay, we've seen Arike in the WNBA now for 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct. Since she was drafted in 2019, fifth overall.
2019. And has never really been on a very successful team. And I wonder if we've reached the conclusion that like you cannot win a championship or maybe even have a consistent playoff team with Arike Ogunbowale as your best player. And I know that worked at Notre Dame. She plays pretty much the same way as she did in college. But, college and pro games are a little bit different. Everybody's really better in the WNBA than they were, back in the ACC and Big East days when Notre Dame was playing. When she was there. And I'm just not sure if that's a recipe for success in the WNBA. She just really takes up a lot of offensive energy on a team. She takes a lot of shots. She has the ball in her hands a lot. And Paige hasn't really played alongside a player like that while she's been in college. And I'm just not sure that works. And I wonder when Dallas is going to come to that conclusion and when they might say, okay, if we're moving in this direction with Paige, then we need to move Arike into another direction to another team.
Yeah. So, in case you missed last week's episode, the analogy that I threw out there when it comes to the Dallas Wings was the first half of the 2024 Indiana Fever season. And you could make an argument that there were points in that first half of the season where the idea of could the backcourt marriage of Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell work? And obviously, in the second half of the season, when they caught fire, they make the postseason for the first time in eons. There was an argument to be made that they were playing like one of the best backcourts in the country. And so I don't want to write off Arike and Paige as a pairing because I also think that Arike and Kelsey Mitchell are two very different players. And certainly in Indiana's case, Caitlin Clark had Christy Sides as her head coach in her rookie season, who was essentially trying to just, I don't want to say coach the scorer out of her, but make her a passing first point guard. Paige, I think, already has some nuance to her game where she's already pretty balanced, whereas we know Caitlin certainly could dish it out at Iowa, but she was known for her scoring prowess. I think that it's different in that regards, but I also think the bigger difference between the two is Kelsey Mitchell certainly has the green light. We've seen it so far through 2 weeks of the Fever season in 2025, but I don't think it's to the extent of Arike Ogunbowale's leash that it has been the last 6 years in Dallas.
Yeah, Arike has had just the green light for her entire career, even going back to her days at Notre Dame. So I kind of wonder if the adjustment for her is a little bit more difficult. Like, you were this great player in college, you were a national champion. You've hit the buzzer beaters. You've been among the league's leading scorers since you've been in the W. You've been an all-star, all the things. So I wonder, whereas Kelsey Mitchell, maybe it was a little bit easier for her to sort of shift her mindset and say, you know what, I am better as a number 2 to Caitlin, or a number 3 to Caitlin and Aaliyah, or whatever it might be. Whereas like Arike, she's been this player for forever. And
she's been the face of the Wings for 6 years.
Yeah, and I just don't know if that works alongside Paige Bueckers. I'm going to read you Arike Ogunbowale's field goal shooting mark so far in the season.
Folks, for those keeping score at home, the stat line that Mitch is about to read off is for a player who at the All-Star break last year was the number 2 scorer in the league behind only Asia Wilson.
And so far this season, we have a 4 of 12 shooting. We have a 2 of 14. We have an 8 of 20, and we have a 2 for 10 in her latest game, that loss at the Atlanta Dream. So I just, it's not only that like it looks disjointed and stuff with Paige and like it doesn't always work, but Arike also just isn't playing well, isn't shooting well, isn't, and she's getting the volume, but the shots aren't going in. And to me, that's just not a recipe for the Dallas Wings. The other kind of weird thing I think about the Wings roster is like they seem committed to playing these like 3 forwards and no true center. They're playing Alyssa Smith, Dejanay Carrington, and Maisha Hines-Allen, and all those players are very talented and very great. But you also have Tierra McCallum on your bench, and I just like, if you're not gonna start her, like you might as well trade her. Like I don't really know what the purpose is of just like bringing her off the bench and playing her 15 minutes a game. So I wonder, I'm keeping my eye on Dallas kind of as the season goes. Number 1, just to see if they make any roster adjustments. And then number 2, just kind of keeping an eye on Paige, because this is going to be probably the first time in her career ever playing basketball that she's going to have to deal with a lot of losing and a lot of losses. And I kind of wonder like how that will affect sort of her play and her psyche and her feelings going forward, and her feelings about the Dallas Wings organization and all those things. Because the Wings are already 0-4. I believe that's more games that UConn lost all this past season. I think UConn had 3 losses. So yeah, it's going to be a tough first season, I think, for Paige in Dallas.
Now, I should note as we move to number 2 in this week's starting 5, Mitch, that we were saying the same thing about Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever 1 year ago today.